welcome.
The Coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare welcomes these guests to his office at the ministry's headquarters in Abuja. These are representatives of organizations that are keen to invest and enhance in-country manufacturing in Nigeria's healthcare sector, a development the minister applauds.
With regard to medical equipment and particular ultrasound, when he discussed with me, you also mentioned it to me, and we had several conversations. We're very pleased because we're in the midst of expanding our primary healthcare system. More than 8,800 units. We're expanding CMONC facilities, 774. We will provide obstetric services. What we want is to have the retail outlets for health delivery, where there's a physical location, there are health workers, they are equipped, they are trained, and they are commodities. And on the affordability, we have an insurance program that allows folks to be able to access it. Simple.
This is one of those milestone events and activities that we don't see often. That from our side, it's a sign also, I hope, that you can see of confidence in Nigeria, but also in the Nigerian government, in your office.
After the landmark investment deals are signed, the national coordinator of the Presidential Healthcare Value Chain Unlocking Program outlines the expected outcomes.
Siemens is also looking to localize the production of ultrasound machines. They will be producing ultrasound machines at least 1,000 per annum at the beginning, and will increase this significantly over the next few years. Today, we've signed 2 MOUs. The first one is with Abbott Diagnostics to actually set up operations locally to produce test kits for HIV, for malaria, for other STIs and other diseases that we call point-of-care diagnostics.
It is expected that these deals, which commence implementation immediately, would contribute thousands of jobs and new revenues towards the growth of the Nigerian economy.
Well, quite a lot to mull over in the health sector. We did see in the dailies this morning that 32 states had to spend about 22 trillion naira in 2025. That's how much they're projecting that they will be able to earn and also spend. The question is, how much of that is going to go into the health sector? Well, somebody who is also very concerned about health, particularly primary health, is in our studios this morning. Dr. Muyi Aina is the Executive Director, Chief Executive Officer of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, the NPHCDA. Thank you so much for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning.
Good morning, Maupe. It's my pleasure to be here.
Indeed. Well, I'm looking at, just some of the things that have happened in the last couple of months, some of them maybe just as recent as a few weeks back, and quite an ambition, it would seem, that the country now has, trying to expand from 8,800 primary healthcare centers that we currently have to 17,600 within the next 4 years. And you hope to collaborate with states on this, that's correct?
Absolutely. I think the way the health system works, as you're probably aware, is that the federal government is responsible for policy and guidelines at the ministry level. The National Primary Healthcare also develops the primary health system. However, the delivery of services, so the hiring of health workers, operation of health facilities at the primary healthcare level, really sits at the subnational level, the state and the LGA. So, of course, we do have to work very closely with them as we hope to develop. Now, as of today, there are about 8,400 primary health centers across the country.
Not 8,800.
Yeah, it's supposed to be 8,800, but there are certain wards that have become inaccessible over the last several years, so they've been sort of decommissioned. So the idea is to move to 8,800 fully functional and then double the number, over the next 2 to 3 years to 17,600. And we have already started to record progress in that. Of course, the first step in there was really to mobilize the resources and to identify how we prioritize, because you cannot go everywhere at the same time. So you have to prioritize. So what we did was to figure out where were the biggest gaps in each state. Where are the women lacking access the most? Where are the children unable to get basic services the most? And we have identified them and worked with the states to do that, of course. And the federal government has already, recorded about 301 or so that have been completely revitalized. Revitalization meaning the infrastructure is there, the equipment is there, the health workers are there. Incremental. there was a baseline of just under 2,000 out of these 8,400 that met the bar of good quality services. So in fulfilling the president's promise to Nigerians, we're really moving in that direction.
Sorry, come again with that number. You said there were just about how many of them that met
so
the
when
standard?
we started about a year ago, out of the 8,406 precisely, just about 20%, so under 2,000 actually, that you could point to and say they could very clearly and safely provide basic services to women and children and men in Nigeria.
So the rest were just buildings? Was that what they were?
No, they're functional, but they had gaps. Sometimes they didn't have enough health workers. Sometimes the equipment were old or obsolete. Sometimes the buildings, they didn't have accommodation. One of the things that we found, for example, is that in rural areas, it was very important to have a residence for the health workers, for their own safety, but so that the facility can work round the clock. One of the other gaps that we saw was empowering. So in many places, the cost of electricity, the cost of diesel meant that the facilities could not work overnight. And as you know, if you take maternal care, for example, many labors happen at night. So one of the things we're having to do is to put backup power, so solarization in these facilities. So when we say fully functional, it is the facility that has all of these things so that you can be guaranteed 24-hour high-quality service by qualified health workers. So all of the facilities have some of this, but there are also, many were lacking in some of the areas, and that's the gap that we're filling.
We do know that a few years back, this was also the priority of the Ministry of Health. You are parastatal under the Ministry of Health. But
that is correct.
At one point in time, the Ministry of Health as a whole was concerned about this. I think it was under the time of Professor Isaac Adewale, who was saying that the federal government was going to build one primary healthcare facility in each local government of the country. I don't know, what became of that particular plan. Was the ministry able to do that?
I think the objective or the goal of having a functional primary health center per ward, not local government, which is why I think you would say about 8,800 or 8,900, because that is the number of political wards that we have, has been, in the mind of the government for quite a while. What's happened, though, is that that's very costly. It takes a lot of resources. And while there was progress, in previous governments, I think we're fortunate under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu that with his goodwill and with the leadership of the coordinating minister, Mohammed Ali Pate, we actually are concretely able to get the resources this time. So I can tell you, for example, that across the states over the next year, facilities that have been, where BOQs have been done, bills of quantity to say the gaps where the states will be using World Bank resources, facilitated by the government to do, are in the order of 2,500 additional facilities. The federal government, we're right now in the process of, again, I said we have counted 301 that between us and partners have been done over the last 6 months or so. There's another 310 that we have commissioned that the contractors are in the field. They're fixing them now. They're putting the solar boreholes, they're putting the solar power, they're putting the residents and the equipment for the health workers. So because we are now able to mobilize the resources, it's still going to be a journey. We're not going to finish overnight, but I think there's concrete progress towards actually actualizing that. And like I said, beyond the one per word, because the president promised that Nigerians that he wants to guarantee access to basic services in a quality and trusted way to every Nigerian, wherever they are. So even beyond the 8,400, when we have gotten them fully functional, we're doubling the number to 17,600 so that in even underserved areas, it comes closer to the people. Of course, the buildings are easy, the equipment, those are resources, but the minister is also leading an effort to increase the number and quality of health workers.
Okay.
We have trained 53,000 health workers.
We'll come to that shortly, but I just wanted to quickly ask you how you're going to, because this is now a priority for the federal government.
Yes.
And the federal government has put this front and center. You've talked about the drive of the coordinating Ministry of Health. However, how are you going to persuade state governments that this should also be a matter of national priority for them, because it is where their interests lie, that's where their budgets will go. How are you getting them to come on board with the idea that this is actually a good place for them to spend their money?
Very good question, Maupe. I think, again, we're fortunate that with the foresight of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, he had initiated and signed a compact with all of the 36 states and the FCT and even our major development partners. Just about a year ago, I believe it was December 13th of 2023, which sort of kicked off the Nigeria Health Sector Renewal Investment Program. All of the states, the federal government, the coordinating minister for health are signed to an agreement of sorts that says, you know, we're going to move together towards revitalizing or improving the quality of primary healthcare. So this initiative is being implemented through a sector-wide approach. And what that means really is that with the oversight or guidance of the Federal Ministry of Health, all of the players in the health sector, especially in primary healthcare, are working in a coordinated way. We have one plan. So what you've talked about, revitalizing 17,600 PHCs, all of the states are bought into that. These PHCs are in the states, in the local governments. They are not at the federal level. So the states are bought into that, and they're working. They're working. Many states have already used their own resources to hire staff, but also to fix these PHCs and procure equipment. We're also doing what we're using one budget. So really looking at all of the resources, you know, in addition, in accordance with the Nigeria Health, the National Health Act of 2014, really saying, what does the federal government bring to the table? What do the state governments bring to the table? What do the local governments bring to the table in terms of resources? But also our development partners. You know, a lot of them already support us with substantial amount of funding. But over $3 billion in addition was committed at the launch of the swap last year, and a lot of that money is already being realized. I spoke to some of what the states are currently using for their PHCs now. So everybody is bought into this. We have these periodic engagements. Just about a month ago, 2 months ago actually, we had the first joint annual review, which is the one conversation where all of the states came together to say, these are the objectives we set. How are we doing? Where are we making progress? Where are we not making progress? And we all went back to re-strategize, to say where there are gaps, where can we accelerate? So I think we are fortunate that the states are signed to this compact and they're really taking it very seriously.
Let me quickly go to Lagos now. I know that Ayo has questions for you.
Thank you, Mark. One of the issues that we raised earlier this morning, sir, is the issue of malnutrition in the northern part of Nigeria, northeast and northwest, to be precise. It's right there on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper. Well, I know it may not be your direct, call, but I'm just wondering how you think that might affect the activities of your organization, the agency that you work with. One is wondering, we're talking about primary health and all, there's always been that conversation around whether or not there is significant collaboration with or activities on the part of the subnationals, the states in particular, and of course, maybe by extension, the local governments. So the scare is quite out there. I don't know how you want to, if you have any reaction to that.
Yes, in fact, I do. I think you touch on a very important point to Nigerians, but also to the government. When the compact was being signed last year, the president had identified a number of priorities, which is what we will be focusing on as all of the stakeholders. Nutrition was one of them. You know, the reduction of stunting, is a big part of them, because I think the president recognizes the importance of good nutrition, especially early in life, to the development of human capital and the ability of people to achieve their potential. So in fact, one of the things that the minister has focused on, and the vice president actually, in fact, the vice president leads a task force on nutrition that pulls in, that's multi-sectoral, pulls in health, pulls in agriculture, pulls in women affairs, puts in all of the other relevant ministries to try to, one, mobilize the resources to really drive towards nutrition, including improving agricultural productivity, improving the technology that farmers can use locally to improve the quality of produce. But when you then come to health, one of the things that we are doing, again, this is domiciled primarily in the Ministry of Health, but we're all working together as one sector, is the minister has mobilized millions and millions of dollars through our resources, through, by reprogramming previously existing resources, but bringing in new resources to identify those critical elements that target pregnant women, because nutrition in utero, while in the belly, is so important to the formation of the brain, So we are procuring and distributing directly nutritional products, again, in collaboration with our states, to pregnant women, but also to children. We are expanding the number of nutrition treatment centers among the PHCs. So it used to be that select PHCs are where you can actually access nutritional services. We're really working together with all of the stakeholders to access that very, very rapidly. So just to say that nutrition is an important issue, and we're tackling that head on and hoping that, trusting actually, that Nigerians will start to feel the impact of all of this very soon.
Well, what is interesting, Dr. Aina, is why acute malnutrition is kind of on the rise in the north. Looking at that story, when I checked it out earlier, it says that the reason is because of low food consumption, and both in terms of quality and quantity. So the question that came to my mind right there was, it's not a problem of production, it's a problem of consumption. So what do you think could be playing out here?
I haven't read the article, but if I'm interpreting what you're saying, I doubt that the food will be there, but the people will refuse to eat it. So if people are not consuming food, presumably it's because there's not enough that is accessible to them, either because we're not producing enough or the little we're producing is priced out of their range, which speaks to all of the issues. And there are a number of myriad of factors, many of them outside the health sector, but again, they're within the purview of the government. There are the issues of rising poverty, given, that we have seen over the last several years that this government is trying to tackle head on by really addressing some of those macroeconomic considerations that actually impact the economy of the individual. Those I think everyone's aware of them, but also the things I spoke about that the vice president is leading nationally, but also that the minister is leading within the health sector to, one, improve the production of high nutrient foods, but also make them more affordable, or in fact free, at least for a while, to alleviate the immediate shortages and crunches for some of the most vulnerable within our populations, which are the pregnant women and the children.
I find that interesting, Dr. Aina, and maybe something a little comical that I found in the news this morning as well is that there's been a rise in the demand for tea and akara in Kano in particular. I don't know why that is. You want to speak to it, but there's something that we have talked about on this program so many times, and that is the issue of collaboration between the federal government and the subnationals. What are the tasks you are having in that regard? Primary health, we are told, is the purview of the local government, but here is the federal government doing something about it. Clearly, it would be difficult, if not impossible, to achieve anything without interface with the state government. So how is that going? What are the challenges that arise as a result of that, and what needs to be done?
Thank you. I think it is important to clarify that all the tiers of government and even non-government, non-state actors do have a role to play, important roles to play in primary health care. At the federal level, ours is the resource mobilization, the guidelines, the policies, and some sort of standardization and regulation, if you will, of primary health center, development of it, human resourcing, knowledge generation, and basically, setting standards and guiding the subnational units. At the state level and the local governments is where the service delivery actually does happen. Now, that said, the federal government does sometimes have interventions to fill gaps. We have the midwifery service scheme, where we're directly hiring and deploying some midwives and skilled birth attendants to fill gaps, just to support the states, because while they are pushing, all hands need to be on deck. And the National Health Act actually supports the primary health care under one roof, which means the states, manage a fund which is contributed to by the federal government, by the state government, by the local government authorities. In the implementation of services, there are also things that the local governments do, primarily around the community-based service delivery, and things like that. But everybody does, in fact, have a role. So to your question about how are we making that happen, I spoke about the compact that was signed, a year ago. But I think there are some specific things that we then also do. Through the sector-wide approach that we're taking to implement the health sector renewal investment program, we do have quarterly reviews with the states, where we sit in one room with all of the 36 states and the Federal Ministry of Health and NPHCDA and NHIA and other parastatals to say, look, again, what did we set for ourselves as goals? What are we doing well in? What are the challenges? And where do we need to step up? Beneath that, we also do have accountability frameworks that we work towards. There are certain incentives that the federal government gives to the states as well. Some of them, the Basic Healthcare Provision Fund, for example, that is largely funded by the federal government, that goes through the states to the facilities. Some of that for health workers, to hiring health workers and things like that. We tie it to some performance things around accountability, around service delivery. And as we're transitioning next year to even a reformed form of that program, we're even improving the acuity, of the performance management. So I think we have I would say we've had a good relationship with the states, and we're really moving together in the same direction to improve primary healthcare services.
Well, Dr. Aina, just one last question from here. Tell us about the sustainability strategy for this initiative that you're talking about, because it will seem like one government in, one fantastic initiative, and then after that, we're back to square one.
In fact, the ideal of the SWAP program is, in fact, to make it more sustainable. So what it does is to align around a government agenda. When you think about how to sustain a program, what are you really talking about? It's one, who's going to do it, in the long term, and two, who's going to finance it, because we have one budget now where all of the resources coming from the partners, all of the resources coming from the government are put on the table and aligned around a set of priorities. We're not trying to solve everything at the same time, but we have a few core priorities that we believe touch the most Nigerians. That allows us to have a vision through an annual operational plan to what our needs really are. We know what we can fulfill today. We know what we need to plan for next year as a government. And what that is doing is, if you look at the year-on-year government budgeting at the federal level, and I believe if you look in the states, you will probably see similar for health, it's increasing multifold, at least when you look in Naira terms. It's because we now have this visibility through the annual operational plans. So for me, that's a key part of sustainability.
And I think it helps a great deal now that there is this primary healthcare leadership challenge, which we understand the Anambra state government came first in, and I think states like a little competition, So what was the criteria for this? So for states who were competing, and what were you looking? Were you involved in those who were marking the states, and was there any politics around it?
Was I involved in those who were marking? No, we had an independent judging panel to evaluate the scores. But, the primary healthcare leadership challenge is really a partnership between the Nigerian Governors Forum, the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, the Federal Ministry of Health, and some of our partners, primarily UNICEF, Aliko Dangote Foundation, and the Bill Gates Foundation, who fund the awards. And the idea was really to galvanize the states to implement the Seattle Declaration of 2019, which are some important leadership actions that we believe impact the performance of primary healthcare system. So financing, is the state budgeting? Are they releasing money for PHC? Is the governor personally, or his close designate, the deputy governor, personally involved in certain PHC activities, supervision of PHC interventions, engagement with traditional leaders. Is there an annual operational plan at the state level that guides where the budget goes to? Things like that we find impacted. And we have the state self-report. The way it works is you have the state self-report, and then we have an independent verification agent, some third-party private sector entity that is hired, not even by the government, but by a partner to go and verify the data. And that's then corrected, and the states are judged. It's in its second year now. We just had the second award. For the first award, it focused on these leadership objectives only. For the second award, we also included certain indicators from the compact that I spoke to earlier, just to align things better. And the result is what we saw. Anambra came first nationally, and there's money. There was $6.1 million, I believe, in total that was shared across the 13 winners.
Well, they got a princely $700,000 from that. Is that going to be cash, or is that in investments, further investment in primary health? It's cash facilities
to the state. But Anambra gets $700,000 for being first overall, but also they were the best in their zone, of course. So they also got, I believe, $500,000 for being that. There was one winner in each zone and the first runner-up in each zone that got $400,000 also. So there were in all about 13 cash prizes, and then one state, Gombe, also won a prize for doing some innovations that were most impressive, in the course of the year. So the funds will go to the state, but there are parameters around what the state can do with it, and it's really around investing it in their PHC system. Now, what they do with it in their primary healthcare system is really up to them. They can decide to hire workers, they can decide to refurbish their facilities, they can decide to buy commodities. That's up to them.
Well, congratulations to Anambra State, and we're looking forward to seeing concrete results, in overall, health indicators as the years go by. We have to thank you very much, Dr. Muyi, for coming on Sunrise Daily this morning. We certainly will be catching up with you much later in the new year, hopefully, seeing how much progress has been made in the primary healthcare sector in Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Maupe. It's been a pleasure.
Well, that's where we have to leave the program this morning. It's been an interesting Monday morning talking about ECOWAS and now healthcare delivery in Nigeria. If you have any opinion on any of these things, or you'd like to ask a question, by all means, use the handles that we have posted so far, Sunrise Daily Now for X, and then Sunrise Daily at channelstv.com. We have to thank you very much for watching this beautiful Monday morning, and we wish you a very productive week ahead. I'm Maupe Ogun Yusuf.
Well, we've got your message, Professor Aina, and thank you so much for sending them as well as others. Amaya Makinedu, have a wonderful rest of your day and a beautiful, productive week.